Hey, my blue speakers. This is Sonic the Hedgehog, and today I'm gonna be doing reaction video to a guy named Matthew Santoro who makes amazing top 10 videos. I'll be doing reaction videos to this guy's videos cause I really like his content. If you're new here, please consider hitting that subscribe button, and please be sure to leave a like on the video if you want to see more. Anyways, let's get into the video in 3, 2, 1, here we go.
In 2019, the world got a sobering reminder of how pandemics can spread with the emergence of COVID-19 and the devastation
that has been a lot of trouble for us lately.
Pandemics are not new to humanity. In fact, far from it. We have survived many pandemics in our history, most of which were far deadlier than the one that we are currently dealing with. But they all changed the world forever and caused devastation during their time, most of which we were completely unprepared for.
Here we go, nice. I hope I can handle what I'm about to hear.
In history. Number 5 is the HIV/AIDS pandemic. The HIV/AIDS pandemic, or epidemic as some call it, is unique because it's a pandemic that we're still living with to this day. The human immunodeficiency
that sounds very
virus,
scary, but I can run fast so I won't get it.
HIV-1 and HIV-2 are believed to have originated in non-human primates in West Central Africa and are believed to have transferred to humans through a process known as zoonosis in the early 20th century. Both are species of lentivirus, a subgroup of retrovirus that infect humans. Over time, they cause acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, or AIDS.
Sounds like it's no good.
appears to have originated in southern Cameroon, while HIV-2 appears to have originated in West Africa, perhaps southern Senegal. Since the first case of infections, the virus has made its way around the world, and AIDS officially became a pandemic by the late 20th century. Today, about 64% of the estimated 40 million people living with HIV live in sub-Saharan Africa. An approximate 1.2 million people in the United States live with HIV, with approximately 16,000 deaths a year. Worldwide, approximately 38 million people live with HIV, with an estimated total of 42 million deaths since the start of that pandemic. To this day, there's no known cure for HIV/AIDS. However, great leaps forward have taken place. An awareness has grown, new treatments have been developed that make HIV far more manageable, and many of those infected go on to lead productive lives. Annual global deaths from HIV/AIDS have dropped to 1.6 million, and as science and technology progresses, many believe a cure will present itself in our lifetime. Number 4 is the Plague of Justinian. The Plague of Justinian began in the year 541 and lasted until 542. It was caused by an outbreak of a single bacterium.
I think I've heard about that from tales one time. That is also horrible.
Plague. It afflicted primarily the Byzantine Empire and the Mediterranean port cities, killing from 30 to 50 million people in a single year. It carried over from the Mediterranean Sea from Egypt, a recently conquered land, paying tribute to Emperor Justinian in grain. However, plague-ridden fleas hitched a ride on the black rats that snacked on that grain. It went on to spread like wildfire across Europe, Asia, North Africa, and Arabia, killing, by some estimates, up to half of the world's population.
Half of the population over-serving a king that is insane.
Incident of the bubonic plague, leaving a devastating trail of destruction behind it, killing up to a quarter of the population of the Eastern Mediterranean. At its peak, it was killing an estimated 110,000 people every day. According to Professor of History Thomas Makaitis at DePaul University, people had no real understanding of how to fight it other than trying to avoid sick people. As far as how the
keep your
pandemic
distance.
ended, our best guess is that it was a mixture of some developing an immunity and the majority of people isolating. Number 3 is the Spanish flu pandemic. The Spanish flu pandemic began in 1918 and lasted until 1920. It infected over 500 million people, about 1/3 of the world population at that time, in 4 successive waves, and included everyone from the South Seas to the North Pole.
That's a lot of people. I feel so bad for those people who died.
Of 20%, with up to 25 million deaths in the first 25 weeks alone. Interestingly, despite its name, this disease did not start in Spain. It was given its name because Spain was a neutral nation during the war and did not enforce strict censorship of its press, which could therefore freely publish early accounts of the illness. As a result, people falsely believed the illness was specific to Spain, and the name Spanish flu stuck. It's believed that
I get what he's saying. Just because the flu targeted Spain doesn't mean it's only targeted Spain.
Observations of it occurring in March of 1918, and then in April in France, Germany, and the UK. This was an unusually deadly influenza pandemic caused by the H1N1 influenza A virus. What separates this pandemic from other influenza outbreaks was that traditionally influenza had always only killed the most vulnerable categories, such as the very young, the elderly, and the immunocompromised. However, this one was an enigma, as it seemed to kill completely healthy young adults while leaving children and those with weaker immune systems still alive. Interestingly, this would not be the last time that we would see this strain of the flu, as the same strain would again resurge in 2009 as the swine flu pandemic.
I remember hearing about this on the news. It was very crazy because I could have gotten the flu while running outside like I usually do. Glad I didn't though.
Death toll vary wildly, with some being anywhere from 17 to 100 million, but the most widely accepted estimate is somewhere between 30 to 50 million. So how did it end? Well, there were no antiviral drugs to treat the virus and no antibiotics to treat the secondary bacterial infections. No vaccine was developed for this pandemic. However, instead, it ended by observing social distancing, the closing of schools and other such gathering places, quarantining, and the widespread use of masks. It's worth noting that San Francisco ended up suffering some of the highest death rates from the Spanish flu nationwide due to public resistance against public gathering orders.
That's how wearing the mask while out in public happened. Also, people, remember to wear your mask for the safety of the people around you.
In place through the spring of 1919, it could have reduced deaths by 90%. Number 2 is smallpox. Smallpox was one of the most devastating and
I remember Knuckles had smallpox one time when he was trying to get the Master Emerald back from Rouge. Don't know why she still tries to get that. It's not that big of a deal.
List, as the number of deaths occurred over a much longer time span, because, as you'll see, number 1 killed many more people in a much shorter time span. It's believed that smallpox extends all the way back to prehistory, originating around 10,000 BC. But the earliest credible evidence of it was found in Egyptian mummies from 3,000 years ago. During the 18th century, the disease killed an estimated 400,000 Europeans each year, including 5 reigning monarchs, and was responsible for a third of all blindness. It's estimated that in the 20th century alone, it killed 300 to 500 million people. Between 20 to 60% of all those infected and over 80% of children died from the disease, or approximately 1 in 3 people
Children, those poor children! That makes me so sad.
Ways, but most frequently through the air in moisture droplets by sneezing, coughing, and talking, but could also be spread through direct contact with infected bodily fluids or contaminated objects, such as bedding or clothing. As recently as 1967, the World Health Organization determined that approximately 15 million people contracted the disease and 2 million people died that year. The disease advances in stages. The first symptoms of smallpox include a high fever, fatigue, a headache, and a backache. After 2 to 3 days, a flat red rash appears on the face and upper arms, and then it spreads all over the body. And over the next 2 to 3 weeks, the flat red spots become firm and dome-shaped and becomes too gruesome to describe any further from there. What makes this disease extra insidious is the incubation period for smallpox is generally 12 to 14 days, which means a person may not even show signs of infection for around 2 weeks. The first smallpox immunization was developed in 1796 and took more than 200 years and a worldwide vaccination program in order to eradicate the disease. The last known naturally occurring case of the disease occurred in 1977 in Somalia and was officially declared eradicated in 1980. In fact, it became the
Thunder,
world's
yes, that's
first
a lifetime.
fully
I wish
eradicated
help could have
disease,
came
and it was
faster.
done
So many people
solely
didn't die
through
from this
vaccination.
illness.
Interestingly, to this day, there are still no treatments for the disease that are proven, tried, and tested. Prevention became the key, and it was done so based on a worldwide vaccination strategy. And number 1 is the Black Death.
Oh
By
no,
far,
not
the
this
most
again.
fatal
I have
pandemic
learned
in
about
history
this when
was
I
the
was a little
Black
headshot.
Death,
It was
also
so
known
horrible,
as
since
the
this is the
plague.
most deadly
Occurring
illness to
between
ever have spread it.
1346 and 1353, it killed a harrowing 75 to 200 million people, the majority of those in just the first 4 years. Originating in Asia, it's believed that it spread between continents via fleas living on rats that so frequently lived aboard merchant ships known as death ships. Ports were major urban centers at the time, and so were perfect breeding grounds for this contagion. The pandemic was especially
Guys, for
devastating
real?
during that
I'm
time
getting
because
really
people
shaken
didn't
up
have
about
the
this.
scientific
When I was a little
understanding of
headshot,
viruses
I had a
and the
scary
like.
dream
All
about the
that they
Black
knew
Death
is that
coming
it
to
had
get me, and
something
he
to
looked
do
just
with
like that in my
proximity.
dream,
In
but by the
fact,
time I
some
woke up, it
forward-thinking
was over.
officials decided to keep newly arrived sailors in isolation until they could prove that they were not sick, making this the invention of quarantine. Interestingly, as time went on, the Venetians increased the forced isolation period to 40 days, or a quarantino, which is where we get the origin of the word quarantine and the start of the practice in the Western world. The plague wiped out half of Europe's population and changed the course of Europe's history forever.
Now I
The
get
main
it.
symptoms
This
of
is
the
how
plague are
quarantine
actually
first
too
began.
gruesome to
Makes
mention in
sense
this
on why
video,
millions of
but
people
also
stay in
include
their homes
fever,
to
chills,
prevent from
vomiting,
getting you know what
diarrhea,
than to basically
terrible
just be
aching
at peace like
pains,
I am.
and then, of course, death. To this day, we don't fully understand how the plague worked, but it was believed to have been transmitted through the air as well as through the bites of infected fleas and rats. It was caused by an outbreak of a single bacterium, again the Yersinia pestis, similar to the plague of Justinian. Other than quarantine, to stop the pandemic, physicians relied on crude and unsophisticated techniques such as bloodletting and boil lancing, practices that were dangerous as well as unsanitary in and of themselves, and superstitious practices such as burning
Not
aromatic
that guy
herbs
again.
and
The
bathing
Black
in
Death may be
rosewater
done for
and
good, but I
vinegar,
still get
but
the
was
feeling that he's
curtailed by
waiting to
methods
strike
that we
again.
still use today,
I hope he doesn't
such as
come back
social
anytime
distancing
soon.
and isolation. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it and learned something, be sure to drop a like on it, share it with your friends, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.
And that was a really interesting video. You outdid yourself once again, Matthew. Never a letdown when the sky is making top 10 content. Anyways, that's all the time I have for today's video. Please be sure to leave a like on the video and hit the subscribe button if you are new here. As always, I'm out of here. See you guys next time. Bye.